I leaned against the doorframe of Kurt's office, watching him pack his briefcase with that familiar precision he brought to everything. 5 years of marriage, and I could predict his every move. "Late night again?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He glanced up, distracted, already mentally somewhere else. "Big presentation tomorrow. Aiden's staying to help me prep." Aiden, his new assistant. I'd heard the name countless times, but never met him. "Maybe I'll swing by later with coffee," I offered, knowing Kurt would be too focused to really hear me. He murmured, kissing my cheek absently before heading out. The house fell quiet, and something restless stirred inside me. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying where this is heading, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. By 9 that evening, I found myself driving to Kurt's building in downtown Atlanta. I told myself it was just coffee, just being a supportive wife. But as I walked through the empty hallways in my fitted dress and heels, I felt something I hadn't in months: anticipation. The office lights were dim except for one corner where a warm glow spilled out. I approached slowly, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. That's when I saw him. Aiden sat behind a desk, sleeves rolled up, dark hair slightly messed from running his hands through it. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 20s, with sharp features and an intensity that made me pause. When he looked up and our eyes met, something electric passed between us. "You must be Rebecca," he said, standing with a smile that was both professional and something else entirely. "Kurt's told me so much about you." His voice was warm, confident, with just a hint of something that made my pulse quicken. "All good things, I hope," I replied, stepping into the office. The space felt smaller with both of us in it, charged with an energy I couldn't quite name. "Where is Kurt anyway?" Aiden's expression shifted slightly. "He left about an hour ago. Emergency call from the client." He moved closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne, something clean and masculine that made me dizzy. But I stayed to finish up some things. Good thing, too, or I would have missed meeting you. We stood there for a moment, the air thick between us. I should have left then, should have made some excuse and walked away. Instead, I found myself asking, "Long day?" He laughed softly, a sound that sent warmth pooling in my stomach. "The longest, but it's looking up now." His eyes held mine, and I felt something shift inside me, something that had been dormant for far too long. "Want some help?" I heard myself asking, moving closer to his desk. "I could organize these files while you work." It was a flimsy excuse, and we both knew it. Aiden's smile widened. "I'd like that." As I reached for the papers scattered across his desk, our hands brushed. The contact was brief but electric, sending a jolt up my arm. Neither of us pulled away. "Rebecca," he said quietly, his voice different now, lower, more intimate. I looked up to find him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "This might be crazy, but I've been thinking about you since Kurt first mentioned your name." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Aiden, I know you feel it too," he continued, stepping closer until there was barely any space between us. This thing between us. He was right. I did feel it. This pull, this magnetic force that seemed to draw us together. My marriage had become routine, predictable, safe. But this, standing here with Aiden in the dim office light, felt dangerous, and alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. "We shouldn't," I whispered, even as my body betrayed me, leaning into his warmth. "Kurt is your boss. He's my husband." "I know," Aiden murmured, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. "But when was the last time you felt this way? When was the last time someone really saw you?" His thumb traced along my jawline, and I shivered. He was asking questions I didn't want to answer, touching parts of me that had been neglected for too long. The rational part of my mind screamed warnings, but it was drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears, the way my skin came alive under his touch. When he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine, soft and questioning at first, I melted. The kiss deepened, months of loneliness and desire pouring out as I wound my arms around his neck. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer until I could feel the solid warmth of his body against mine. "God, Rebecca," he breathed against my lips. "You're incredible." No one had called me incredible in years. No one had looked at me like I was something precious, something to be treasured and desired. I felt his fingers trace the curve of my spine, sending shivers through my entire body. The office around us seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in our own private world. "Aiden," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What are we doing?" His answer came in the form of another kiss, deeper this time, more urgent. His hands tangled in my hair as he backed me against the desk. The cool wood pressed against my lower back as he lifted me easily, settling me on the edge. His hands roamed over my thighs, pushing the fabric of my dress higher. Every touch sent electricity through me, awakening parts of myself I'd almost forgotten existed. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, his lips trailing down my neck. "I've wanted this since the moment I saw your picture on Kurt's desk." The mention of my husband's name should have stopped me, should have brought me back to reality. Instead, it only intensified the forbidden thrill racing through my veins. This was wrong, dangerous, everything I shouldn't want. But as Aiden's mouth found that sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder, I couldn't bring myself to care. His hands were gentle but insistent, exploring every curve with a reverence that made me feel worshipped. When he looked into my eyes, asking silent permission for each new touch, I saw something there that had been missing from my life. Genuine desire, real connection, the kind of heat that consumed everything in its path. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough with want. "Tell me this is crazy and walk away." But I couldn't. Instead, I pulled him closer, my fingers working at the buttons of his shirt. I needed to feel his skin against mine, needed to lose myself in this moment that felt more real than anything had in years. The fabric fell away, revealing the lean muscle beneath. My hands explored the planes of his chest, feeling his heart racing under my palms. He groaned softly at my touch, his control slipping. "Rebecca, are you sure about this?" he asked, even as his hands continued their exploration of my body. "I've never been more sure of anything," I breathed, surprising myself with the honesty of it. And it was true. In this moment, with this man who saw me as more than just a wife going through the motions, I felt more alive than I had in years. He gathered me closer, his mouth finding mine again in a kiss that tasted like promises and secrets. I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him against me, feeling the evidence of his desire pressed against my core. The sensation sent waves of heat through me, building to something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was. "Like, not here," he whispered against my lips. "Come with me." He helped me down from the desk, his hands steadying me as my legs threatened to give way. Taking my hand, he led me to the small conference room adjacent to the main office. The space was intimate, lit only by the city lights streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He turned to face me, his eyes dark with desire, but still gentle, still asking permission. I answered by reaching for him, pulling him down for another kiss. This time there was no hesitation, no holding back. We moved together with an urgency born of months of unspoken attraction, our hands mapping each other's bodies with growing confidence. The fabric of my dress whispered as it slipped away, pooling at my feet. I should have felt exposed, vulnerable, but under Aiden's appreciative gaze, I felt powerful, beautiful, desired in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. "Perfect," he murmured, his hands skimming over my skin. "You're absolutely perfect." His clothes joined mine on the floor as we came together, skin against skin, heat building between us like a fever. Every touch was electric, every kiss a revelation. When he lifted me onto the conference table, positioning himself between my thighs, I gasped at the intimacy of it, the way he filled spaces in me I didn't even know were empty. "Look at me," he said softly, his hands framing my face. Our eyes met and held as we moved together, building a rhythm that felt natural as breathing. The connection was more than physical. It was emotional, spiritual, everything I'd been craving, without even realizing it. The city lights painted our skin in shades of gold and shadow as we lost ourselves in each other. Time seemed suspended, the outside world forgotten. There was only this moment, this feeling, this man who made me remember what it was like to be truly desired. When the waves of sensation finally crested, we clung to each other, breathing hard, hearts racing in sync. Aiden pressed his forehead to mine, his breath warm against my skin. "That was..." he started, then trailed off, shaking his head. I don't have words for what that was. I knew exactly what he meant. What had just happened between us transcended anything I'd experienced before. It wasn't just about the physical release, though. That had been incredible. It was about being seen, being wanted, being cherished in a way that made me feel whole again. As we slowly separated and began gathering our clothes, reality started to creep back in. What had we done? What did this mean? How could I go home to Kurt and pretend nothing had changed when everything had changed? "Rebecca," Aiden said quietly, pulling on his shirt. "I need you to know that this wasn't casual for me. This meant something." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. It had meant something to me too, more than I was ready to admit. "What happens now?" I asked, smoothing down my dress with shaking hands. The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. Aiden moved closer, his hand cupping my cheek with infinite tenderness. "That's up to you," he said. "But I hope this isn't the end." I leaned into his touch, closing my eyes. "It's complicated," I whispered. "I know," he replied. But some things are worth complicating your life for. We stood there for a long moment, both knowing that we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Finally, I gathered my purse and headed for the door. I should go, I said, though every fiber of my being wanted to stay. Aiden nodded, understanding. Drive safely. And Rebecca? I turned back to him. No regrets, okay? Whatever happens next, don't regret this. The drive home passed in a blur. My body still hummed with the memory of Aiden's touch. My lips still tingled from his kisses. How was I supposed to walk into my house and face Kurt, knowing what I'd just done? How was I supposed to pretend that everything was normal when I felt like a completely different person? Kurt was already asleep when I slipped into bed beside him. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of what had happened. The guilt was there, sharp and persistent, but it was overshadowed by something else, a sense of awakening, of coming back to life after years of sleepwalking through my marriage. The next morning, Kurt was already gone when I woke up. A note on the kitchen counter said the presentation had gone well and he'd be working late again. I stared at his familiar handwriting, feeling like I was looking at a stranger's words. How long had we been living parallel lives like this, going through the motions without really connecting? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for last night. It was everything I hoped it would be and more. A. I stared at the message, my heart racing. He'd gotten my number from Kurt's emergency contact list, I realized. The intimacy of him having my number, of being able to reach me anytime, sent a thrill through me. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before finally settling on, no regrets. It was true. Despite the complications, despite the risk, I couldn't bring myself to regret what had happened. It had been too perfect, too right, too much what I'd been missing. His response came quickly. Good, because I can't stop thinking about you. Neither could I. Throughout the day, as I went through my usual routines, my mind kept drifting back to the conference room, to Aiden's hands on my skin, to the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious. That evening, another text. Working. Late again. Kurt left an hour ago. The office feels empty without you. My pulse quickened. Was he asking me to come back? The smart thing would be to stay home, to end this before it went any further. But when had I ever done the smart thing when it came to Aiden? An hour later, I found myself back in that familiar elevator, my reflection in the polished doors showing a woman who looked more alive than she had in years. This time, there was no pretense about coffee or helping with files. We both knew why I was there. Aiden was waiting by the elevator when the doors opened, as if he'd been watching for me. You came, he said softly, his eyes drinking me in. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I admitted, stepping into his arms. This time there was no hesitation, no questioning. We came together with the hunger of people who'd been starving, without realizing it. He led me to his office this time, closing and locking the door behind us. The city stretched out below us through the windows, twinkling with 1,000 lights, but I only had eyes for him. I've been thinking about you all day, he confessed, his hands already working at the buttons of my blouse. I couldn't concentrate on anything else. Good, I breathed, my fingers tangling in his hair. I'd hate to be the only one going crazy. This time, we took our time, exploring each other with the leisure of lovers rather than the urgency of a first encounter. Every touch was deliberate, every kiss a promise. When he pressed me back against his desk, I felt the smooth wood cool against my skin. The contrast between the hard surface and his gentle touch sent shivers through me. Tell me what you want, he whispered against my ear, his breath hot and urgent. The question caught me off guard. When was the last time someone had asked me what I wanted? You, I said simply, the honesty of it surprising us both. Just you. It was the truth. In this moment, in this stolen time between my real life and this beautiful fantasy, all I wanted was him. He worshipped me with his hands and mouth, taking his time to learn every curve, every sensitive spot that made me gasp and arch beneath him. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be the center of someone's attention like this, to be treated like something treasured and desired. When we finally came together, it was with a slowness that built the tension between us to an almost unbearable degree. Every movement was deliberate, every breath shared. I could see the city lights reflected in his eyes as he moved above me, and I felt like we were suspended in time and space, existing in our own private universe. The sensations built gradually, like waves gathering strength before crashing against the shore. When the peak finally came, it was with an intensity that left me shaking, clinging to him as the world shattered and reformed around us. He followed moments later, my name on his lips like a prayer. Afterward, we lay entwined on the leather couch. In his office, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slowly return to normal. This is dangerous, I said quietly, though I made no move to leave his arms. I know, he replied, his fingers stroking through my hair. Does that scare you? I considered the question. It should scare me. I was risking my marriage, my stability, everything I'd built my life around. But lying here with Aiden, feeling more myself than I had in years, I couldn't bring myself to care about the danger. Not as much as going back to the way things were, I admitted. He was quiet for a long moment, processing my words. What are we doing, Rebecca? He asked finally. It was the question I'd been avoiding, the one that would force us to examine what this was beyond the physical attraction. I don't know, I said honestly, but I know I can't stop. Neither could he, apparently. Over the next few weeks, we fell into a pattern. Kurt would work late, I would find reasons to visit the office, and Aiden and I would steal these precious hours together. Each encounter was different but equally intense, equally consuming. Sometimes we barely made it past the elevator before we were in each other's arms. Other times we would talk for hours, sharing pieces of ourselves that we'd never shared with anyone else. I learned about his dreams of starting his own company, his complicated relationship with his family, his fear that he'd never find someone who truly understood him. In return, I told him about my own dreams, the ones I'd set aside when I got married. The growing sense that I'd been living someone else's life for so long I'd forgotten who I really was. He listened without judgment, holding me close as I admitted fears and desires I'd never spoken aloud. You're incredible, he would tell me, and in his eyes I could see that he meant it. You're strong and beautiful, and so much more than you give yourself credit for. It was intoxicating, being seen like that, being valued for more than just the role I played in someone else's life. But even in our stolen paradise, reality had a way of intruding. One evening, as we lay tangled together on his office couch, my phone rang. Kurt's name lit up the screen, and the sound shattered our intimate bubble like glass. I should answer, I said reluctantly, though every fiber of my being wanted to ignore it. Rebecca? Kurt's voice sounded tired. Where are you? I came home early and you weren't here. My heart hammered as I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm out with Sarah, I lied, naming my sister. Girls' night, I texted you earlier. There was a pause. Oh, right. I must have missed it. Well, have fun. I'll probably be asleep when you get home. The ease with which the lie came, the way Kurt accepted it without question, should have made me feel guilty. Instead, it made me sad. When had we become strangers living in the same house? When had we stopped really seeing each other? After I hung up, Aiden pulled me closer. You okay? He asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. He didn't even question it, I said, more to myself than to him. He just accepted that I'd be somewhere else, doing something else, with someone else. Maybe, Aiden said carefully. That says something about where you two are right now. It did say something, and that something was terrifying. How long had Kurt and I been going through the motions? How long had we been more like roommates than lovers? As if reading my thoughts, Aiden's arms tightened around me. Hey, he said softly. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. Right now, let's just be here, together. He was right. Whatever complications awaited us in the real world, we had this moment. I turned in his arms, pressing my lips to his, losing myself in the safety of his embrace. But even as we came together again, even as the heat between us burned away all thought of the outside world, I knew we were reaching a point where we'd have to make choices. This couldn't go on indefinitely. Eventually, something would have to give. The crisis came sooner than expected. 3 days later, Kurt arrived home early, unusual excitement in his voice. Great news, he announced as I pretended to be absorbed in my book. The Henderson project is moving forward and they want to fast-track it. I'm promoting Aiden to project manager. My blood ran cold. That's wonderful, I managed. I want to celebrate, Kurt continued, oblivious to my distress. Let's have Aiden over for dinner this weekend. You can finally meet him properly. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. Meet him properly. If only Kurt knew how thoroughly I'd already met his assistant. Are you sure that's necessary? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. I mean, it's work. You don't need to bring work home. Kurt looked at me strangely. It's not about work, Becca. It's about celebrating someone who's become important to me. Aiden's like the younger brother I never had. The words hit me like a physical blow. Important to him. Like a brother. How could I have let this happen? That night, I called Aiden from the bathroom, my voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk, I said. Kurt wants to have you over for dinner. There was a long silence on the other end. When? He asked finally. This Saturday. Another pause. We can handle this, Rebecca. We just need to be careful. But when Saturday came, I wasn't sure we could handle anything. Watching Aiden shake Kurt's hand at our front door, seeing them laugh together over drinks, witnessing Kurt's genuine affection for the man I'd been sharing such intimate moments with, it was torture. Aiden played his part perfectly. He was charming, professional, just the right amount of friendly without crossing any lines. But I caught the looks he gave me when Kurt wasn't watching, the way his eyes lingered on my mouth when I spoke, the tension in his shoulders when Kurt put a casual arm around my waist. "Rebecca's been so curious about you," Kurt said during dinner, making my heart stop. "She's always asking about my mysterious new assistant." Aiden's eyes met mine across the table. "All good things, I hope," he said, echoing the words from our first meeting. "Only the best," I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Kurt speaks very highly of you." The conversation was so normal, so mundane, that the undercurrents of tension felt almost surreal. Here we were, having dinner like civilized people, while inside I was screaming with the effort of pretending. After dinner, Kurt excused himself to take a work call, leaving Aiden and me alone in the kitchen. The moment we heard Kurt's voice, from his study, Aiden moved closer. "This is killing me," he whispered, his hand brushing mine as he helped clear the dishes. "Being this close to you and not being able to touch you." "Don't," I breathed, though I made no move to step away. He could come back any second. But the danger only seemed to intensify the pull between us. When Aiden's fingers traced along my wrist, I shivered despite myself. "Meet me tomorrow," he said urgently. "The usual place. We need to talk about this." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Kurt's laughter echoed from the study, and the sound sent guilt shooting through me like a knife. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced normalcy. When Aiden finally left, Kurt was full of praise for his assistant. "Great guy," he said as we got ready for bed. "I'm lucky to have him on the team." If only he knew just how thoroughly I agreed with that assessment. The next day, I met Aiden at a small cafe across town, far from Kurt's office and our usual haunts. He was already there when I arrived, looking tired and conflicted. "We can't keep doing this," he said without preamble. Last night made that clear. I knew he was right, but the words still felt like a death sentence. "So what are you saying?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "I'm saying we need to figure out what we want. Really want, because this limbo we're in isn't fair to anyone, especially Kurt." The mention of my husband's name hung between us like a wall. "He trusts you," I said quietly. "He thinks of you like family." Aiden's jaw tightened. "I know, and that makes what we're doing 10 times worse." But even as he said it, his hand reached across the table to cover mine. "That doesn't make it any less real, though. What we have, what we feel, that's real too." I looked down at our joined hands, thinking about the impossible choice ahead of me. Stay with Kurt, honor my vows, live a safe but passionless life. Or take a leap of faith with Aiden, risk everything for the chance at something extraordinary. "I need time," I said finally, "to think, to figure out what I want." Aiden nodded, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "How much time?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I can't keep sneaking around like this. It's destroying me." We parted with a kiss that tasted like goodbye, though neither of us said the word. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with possibilities and consequences. How had my life become so complicated? A few months ago, my biggest worry was what to make for dinner. Now I was facing a choice that would define the rest of my life. Kurt was working in his study when I got home, bent over his laptop with the same focus he brought to everything. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway, smiling absently. "Hey babe, how was lunch with Sarah?" Another lie. They were coming so easily now. "Fine," I said, studying his face. When had the lines around his eyes gotten so deep? When had his hair started thinning at the temples? We'd been together for 7 years, married for 5, but looking at him now, I felt like I was seeing a stranger. "Kurt," I said suddenly, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Are you happy? With us, I mean? With our marriage?" He looked up, surprised by the question. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" But his answer came too quickly, too automatically, as if he'd never really considered the question. "I don't know," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. "It just feels like we're going through the motions sometimes, like we're roommates, instead of husband and wife." Kurt closed his laptop, giving me his full attention for the first time in weeks. "Becca, what's brought this on? Are you unhappy?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with 5 years of unspoken truths. Was I unhappy? I thought about the woman I'd been before Aiden, the one who'd sleepwalked through her days, who'd settled for safe and predictable. Then I thought about the woman I was with Aiden, alive and passionate and fully herself. "I don't know," I said. "Honestly, I think maybe I've been unhappy for a long time without realizing it." Kurt's face went pale. "Is there someone else?" he asked quietly, and the directness of the question caught me off guard. I could have lied, should have lied. but looking at his face, seeing the genuine concern there, I found I couldn't. I don't know, I repeated, and it was the most honest answer I could give, because what Aiden and I had, was that someone else, or was it a different version of myself? We talked until nearly dawn, really talked for the first time in months. Kurt admitted that he'd felt the distance between us too, that work had become easier than dealing with the growing silence at home. I told him about feeling invisible, about missing the passion we'd once shared, about wondering if we'd grown into different people who no longer fit together. "So what do we do?" he asked finally, his voice exhausted. "I don't know," I said for the third time that night, "but I think we both need to figure out what we really want." Kurt nodded slowly. "Maybe we should try counseling," he suggested. "Or maybe," I said carefully, "we should try some time apart, just to think." The suggestion hung between us like a bridge we were both afraid to cross. "Is that what you want?" Kurt asked. "Space?" I thought about Aiden, about the choice I was facing, about the woman I'd been becoming in those stolen hours. "I think it might be what we both need," I said. 3 days later, Kurt moved into the guest room. It was supposed to be temporary, just until we figured things out. But as I lay alone in our marriage bed, I knew that some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. Some choices, once made, changed everything that came after. I hadn't seen Aiden since our conversation at the cafe, but he was never far from my thoughts. Every morning, I woke up thinking about him. Every night, I fell asleep remembering his touch. The space Kurt and I had created was supposed to give me clarity, but all it did was make me realize how much I missed what I'd found with Aiden. On Friday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "I know you need space, but I miss you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I miss you too." His reply came instantly. "The office. 1 hour. Just to talk." I should have said no, should have honored the space I'd asked for. But an hour later, I was back in that familiar elevator, my heart racing with anticipation and fear. Aiden was waiting in his office, and the moment I saw him, I knew that all my attempts at rational thought had been futile. This wasn't something I could think my way out of. It was something I could only feel my way through. "I've been going crazy," he said, pulling me into his arms. "Not knowing where we stand, not knowing if I've lost you." I melted into his embrace, feeling whole for the first time in days. "You haven't lost me," I whispered against his chest. "I don't think you could if you tried." We made love that night with a desperation born of separation, clinging to each other as if we could make up for lost time through sheer intensity. Afterward, as we lay entwined on his office couch, Aiden traced patterns on my bare shoulder with his fingertip. "I love you," he said quietly, and the words hit me like lightning. Love. We'd never said it before, though it had been hovering between us for weeks. "I know it's complicated. I know it's not fair to anyone, but I love you, Rebecca. And I need you to know that." I closed my eyes, feeling tears threaten. "I love you too," I whispered, and saying it aloud made it real in a way that terrified and exhilarated me. God help me, I love you too. So here I am, caught between two worlds, two choices, two versions of myself. The safe path leads back to Kurt, to our comfortable but passionless marriage, to a life of security and predictability. The dangerous path leads to Aiden, to love and passion and uncertainty, to risking everything for the chance at something extraordinary. Some secrets change everything, even the ones we try to keep buried. When you find something that makes you feel truly alive for the first time in years, how do you choose between love and loyalty? Tell me in the comments, what would you do in my place? And if this story stirred something in you, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what I decide next. Thanks for listening to my secret. Until next time.